The following story is a work of fiction intended for entertainment purposes only. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.
There is a specific kind of silence that happens when $5 million evaporates in a single second. It's not peaceful. It's heavy. It sucks the air right out of the room. I was standing at the front of the boardroom, holding the HDMI cable that was supposed to connect to the demo laptop, and I just let it drop to the carpet. The thud wasn't loud, but Julianne, my boss, flinched like I'd thrown a brick at her. She looked at the blank screen, then at the confusing error message on her own tablet, and then at me with this desperate, wide-eyed look that screamed for help. I didn't help her. I just smiled, the kind of polite, sad smile you give a stranger on the subway, and walked out the glass doors. But to understand why I was willing to torch my entire reputation and blow up a Manhattan tech darling in front of top-tier venture capitalists, you have to understand the 3 months of hell that led up to that moment. It started back in early September. I was the senior dev, lead for a mid-sized fintech startup in Chelsea. We were in stealth mode, which is just tech speak for nobody knows who we are, but we're burning cash like crazy. Our product, let's call it Project Onyx, was supposed to revolutionize how small businesses handled international payroll. It was complex, it was messy, and it was entirely dependent on a team of 6 people. We were the core team. There was me, handling the back-end architecture. There was Marcus, a front-end wizard who could code in his sleep but ran on caffeine and anxiety. Sarah was our UX lead, probably the most talented designer I've ever met, and 3 junior devs who worshipped the ground we walked on. And then there was Julianne. Julianne was our director of product. She was the kind of person who seemed to vibrate with energy. She was always perfectly dressed, always had a coffee in hand, and always knew exactly what to say to make you feel like you were the most important person in the company. She wasn't technical. She couldn't write a line of code if her life depended on it, but she was a master at managing up. The founders loved her. The investors loved her. And for a long time, we loved her too. She had this way of framing abuse as camaraderie. When we stayed until 10 p.m., she'd order the expensive sushi and talk about how we were building the future. When we worked weekends, she'd send us long, emotional emails about how our sacrifice was the backbone of the company. We bought it. We bought all of it because we thought we were partners, not just employees. The shift happened when the launch date for Project Onyx was moved up. The board wanted us to go live in November, right before the holiday freeze. That gave us 8 weeks to do about 6 months' worth of work. I remember the meeting where she dropped the bomb. She called the core team into the glass-walled conference room, the fishbowl, we called it. She looked grave, serious, but also excited. She told us that the board was putting everything on this launch. If we hit the date, the company valuation would triple. But then she leaned in, dropped her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, and dropped the real hook. She told us that post-launch, the department was restructuring. She said the founders had authorized her to promote the entire core team. I was going to be VP of engineering. Marcus was looking at a director of technology role. Sarah was going to be chief creative officer. Significant equity bumps, massive salary raises, and best of all, we would be hiring our own teams. We wouldn't be doing the grunt work anymore. We would be managing the people doing the grunt work. I looked at Marcus, and I could see the exhaustion in his eyes get replaced by adrenaline. Sarah, who had been talking about quitting to start a bakery, suddenly looked ready to go to war. Julianne knew exactly which buttons to push. She told us that the next 8 weeks would be the hardest of our lives, But on the other side of it, we would be made. We would be set for life. So we drank the Kool-Aid. We dove in head first. The first month was a blur of energy drinks and takeout boxes. I don't think I saw my apartment in daylight for 3 weeks straight. We were fixing bugs, rewriting architecture, and polishing the UI until it gleamed. Julianne was there with us, not coding, but facilitating. She was always hovering, asking for updates, cheering us on. But looking back, there was something weird about her requests during that time. It started about 3 weeks into the crunch. I was debugging a critical server issue at like 9 p.m. on a Tuesday when Julianne pulled a chair up to my desk. She asked me how it was going, gave me the usual pep talk, and then asked me to do something strange. She told me she needed me to start documenting my daily workflow, not just the code documentation, which is standard, but a step-by-step guide on how I solved problems, how I accessed the servers, and the specific commands I used for deployment. I asked her why, because honestly, I barely had time to use the bathroom, let alone write a user manual for my own job. She smiled that dazzling smile and touched my arm. She said it was for the new team. She told me that once I was VP, I shouldn't be wasting my brainpower on deployment protocols. She wanted everything written down so that the day after launch, we could hand a manual to the junior hires, and I could step into my strategy role immediately. She said she didn't want me trapped in the weeds when I got my promotion. It sounded logical. It sounded like she was looking out for me. So I did it. I told Marcus and Sarah to do the same. We spent our precious few hours of downtime writing detailed SOPs, standard operating procedures, for everything we did. We literally wrote the instruction manual on how to be us. I remember joking with Marcus about it in the break room one night. I told him we were writing the Bible of Marcus, so the new kids wouldn't break his code. He laughed and said he hoped the new hires could read because his code was spaghetti. We were so arrogant. We were so sure of our value that the thought of being replaced didn't even cross our minds. We thought we were writing training materials for our subordinates, but the first red flag, the one I really should have paid attention to, popped up a week later. I was in a meeting with the CTO, a guy named David, who was mostly hands-off, and I mentioned the new hiring budget for my future team. I just wanted to know if we were looking at senior or junior devs so I could tailor the documentation. David looked at me with a blank expression. He adjusted his glasses and asked what hiring budget I was talking about. My stomach did a little flip. I told him Julianne had mentioned we were scaling the team post-launch. David just kind of shrugged and said, Julianne handled the operational budget, so if she said it was there, it was there. He didn't seem to know anything about a massive restructuring or 3 new director-level positions, but I dismissed it. I told myself Julianne was keeping it under wraps until the launch was successful, or that David was just checked out as usual. I didn't want to see the truth. I wanted the promotion. I wanted the equity. So I went back to my desk, opened the document titled Server Deployment Protocols, and kept typing. I was literally digging my own grave, keystroke by keystroke, and I was thanking her for the shovel. Then came the efficiency consultant. That was the moment everything started to feel wrong. We were 4 weeks away from launch when Stefan showed up. Julianne introduced him as an operational efficiency consultant. He was a quiet guy, always taking notes on a pristine legal pad, wearing suits that looked a little too stiff for a startup environment. Julianne told us Stefan was there to observe our workflows so he could help build the organizational chart for our new departments. She said he was there to make sure we had the resources we needed when we stepped up into management, but Stefan didn't act like a consultant. He acted like a student. He would pull a chair up behind Marcus while he was coding the payment gateway and just sit there for hours. He wouldn't ask about high-level strategy or team dynamics. He asked about syntax. He asked specific questions about where the API keys were stored. He asked Marcus to slow down so he could see exactly which terminal commands he was typing. I remember Marcus coming to me one afternoon, looking like a ghost. He hadn't shaved in 3 days and his eyes were bloodshot. He asked me why an efficiency consultant needed to know the root password for the staging server. I told him not to worry about it. I was so deep in the Kool-Aid, I defended it. I told Marcus that Stefan was probably just being thorough, documenting security protocols for the audit. I actually told my friend, "Trust the process, man. In a month, you won't even be touching the terminal. You'll have a team doing it for you." I feel sick just thinking about that now. I was gaslighting my own team on her behalf. The pressure cooker was dialed up to 11. We were working 16-hour days. I missed my sister's engagement party. Sarah missed her anniversary dinner. She actually cried in the break room for 20 minutes, then washed her face and went back to designing the dashboard because Julianne had told her the UI lacked pop. Julianne, meanwhile, was becoming harder to find. She was always in high-level strategy meetings or out at investor lunches. She'd breeze into the office at 4 p.m., smelling like expensive perfume and white wine, ask us for a status report, offer a few empty platitudes about hustle culture, and then leave by 6. 5 days before launch, we hit the breaking point. The code was stable but fragile. We were running on fumes. It was a Tuesday night, around 9 p.m. The office was empty, except for the core team and the hum of the HVAC system. Julianne had actually stayed late that night, which was rare because she was prepping her keynote speech for the investor demo. She came into our workspace, flustered. She was holding her iPad Pro and a stack of papers. She told me she needed the latest user metrics for her slide deck immediately. I started pulling the data, and she set her iPad down on my desk, right next to my keyboard. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen, cursed under her breath, and told me she had to take this call. It was the lead investor. She ran out of the room to take it in the hallway, leaving the iPad sitting there. I didn't mean to snoop. I really didn't. I was just typing away, pulling the SQL query for the user stats. But then a notification banner dropped down from the top of her iPad screen. It was a message from an app called Signal. The preview text read, "Stefan, documentation is 95% complete. Team B in Bangalore is ready to take over server access on Monday morning. Confirming the kill date?" I stopped typing. My brain couldn't process the words. Team B? Kill date? I looked at the door. Julianne was pacing in the hallway, laughing at something the investor said. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew I had maybe 30 seconds. I reached out and tapped the notification. The iPad wasn't passcode locked. It opened right into the chat thread. And as I scrolled up, my entire world collapsed. It wasn't just outsourcing. We weren't training our subordinates. We were training our replacements. Stefan wasn't a consultant. He was the transition lead for a budget outsourcing firm. The plan was detailed, cold, and calculated. October 12th, Julianne asks for lowest cost provider to maintain Stack post-launch. October 15th, she confirms that the current team is expensive legacy bloat. November 1st, Stefan asks about the passwords. Julianne replies, "Don't worry, I have them documenting everything. They're writing the manual for you. I'll have the keys by Friday." But the kicker, the thing that made my vision actually go blurry with rage, was a PDF attached to a message from the CEO of the outsourcing firm. It was a cost savings analysis. It outlined how firing the core team immediately after launch would save the company $1.2 million in annual salaries and equity vesting. And right below that figure was a line item for Julianne. Performance bonus, efficiency execution, $250,000. She wasn't just firing us. She was selling us out for a $250,000 check. She had negotiated a bonus based specifically on how much money she saved by getting rid of us before our equity vested. Every late night, every missed family event, every line of documentation we wrote, it was all just padding her bank account. I heard the click of heels on the hallway floor. She was coming back. I quickly swiped the app closed and returned to the home screen. I pulled up my SQL query just as she breezed back into the room. "Crisis averted," she chirped, flashing that winning smile. "Investors are pumped. Did you get those metrics?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time, I didn't see a mentor or a leader. I saw a predator. I saw someone who would eat her own young if it meant she got a slightly better table at a restaurant. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded calm, which terrified me. "Just sending them over now." She grabbed her iPad. "Thanks, you're a lifesaver. Seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you. When you're VP, I'm going to miss having you in the trenches." She patted my shoulder, the same shoulder she was planning to stab in 5 days, and walked back to her office. I sat there for a minute, staring at the cursor blinking on my screen. Marcus spun his chair around. "Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I looked at Marcus, then over at Sarah, then at the junior devs who were literally asleep on beanbag chairs in the corner. They looked so young, so tired. "Marcus," I said quietly, "close the door and wake everyone up. We need to talk." I wasn't going to quit. Quitting was too easy. Quitting would let her win. She wanted a product launch. She wanted to show the investors how efficient she was. I was going to give her a show she would never forget. I locked the conference room door and told everyone to put their phones in the center of the table. I didn't want any accidental butt dials or notifications giving us away. When I told them what I saw on Julianne's iPad, the outsourcing plan, the efficiency bonus, the fact that Stefan was basically a corporate grim reaper measuring us for coffins, the room went dead silent. At first, they didn't want to believe it. It's hard to accept that someone you've eaten dinner with, someone who asked about your sick mom or your wedding plans, is actively plotting to ruin you. Marcus was the first to try and rationalize it. He stammered something about how maybe it was a contingency plan, or maybe I misunderstood the context. He looked like a kicked puppy. He didn't want to believe that the last 3 months of his life, the 18-hour days, the missed sleep, were for nothing. So I told him to check the server logs. I told him to look for IP addresses from Bangalore accessing the read-only documentation folders we'd been filling up. He opened his laptop, his hands shaking a little. It took him about 2 minutes. The color drained out of his face so fast I thought he was going to pass out. He spun the laptop around. There it was. Dozens of logins from an external agency, time-stamped to the exact moment Stefan was observing us. They weren't just reading the manual. They were already copy-pasting our code repositories. Sarah, our designer, just put her head in her hands and started crying. Not loud, sobbing crying, but that quiet, angry kind. She whispered that she had put a down payment on a house, based on the raise Julianne promised her. She was going to lose the deposit. She was going to be unemployed in a week. The energy in the room shifted. It went from shock to grief, and then, very quickly, to a cold, hard rage. One of the junior devs, a kid named Leo, stood up and said we should just delete everything. Wipe the servers. Brick the product. I shook my head. I told him that if we did that, she'd sue us into oblivion. We'd be liable for damages. We couldn't destroy the product. We had to be smarter than that. We had to let her destroy herself. I looked at the whiteboard where we had drawn out the launch architecture. The system was designed to be secure, extremely secure. The live production database was encrypted at rest. To go live for the demo, the database had to be decrypted using a 256-bit key that was currently split across the 3 core admin accounts: mine, Marcus's, and Sarah's. Usually, on launch day, we would input our keys, the system would unlock, and the demo would run smooth as butter. Julianne didn't know how the encryption worked. She just knew that when she pressed start, it worked. I looked at the team and laid out the plan. We weren't going to quit. We weren't going to scream or shout. We were going to finish the week. We were going to smile. We were going to finish the documentation. But we were going to make one small, crucial adjustment. We were going to change the encryption keys. For the next 4 days, we put on the performance of a lifetime. It was excruciating. Julianne was in peak girl boss mode. She was practically vibrating with excitement. She bought us donuts. She talked about the celebration dinner she had booked at a Michelin star restaurant for Friday night. Every time she smiled at me, I imagined that $250,000 bonus check clearing in her account. And I had to physically restrain myself from throwing my coffee in her face. But we played along. I handed her the final transition manual on Thursday afternoon. It was a beautiful document. It had everything: login procedures, emergency contacts, code-style guides. But on page 42, under Emergency Database Decryption, I had replaced the actual server commands with a string of gibberish that looked technical, but did absolutely nothing. The night before the launch, Stefan the consultant came by to collect our company laptops. He said it was standard procedure for the hardware upgrade we were getting as part of our promotions. He said he needed to prep them for the new security clearance. It was a lie, obviously. They were taking our access away before they fired us. I handed over my laptop with a smile. I told Stefan I hoped the new team enjoyed the hardware. He gave me a smug little nod, like he was doing me a favor by taking it. What he didn't know was that we had already pushed the new encryption protocols to the live server. The only way to unlock the demo now was with a 2-factor authentication code that, generated on our personal phones, not the company laptops, and definitely not in the manual I gave Julianne. Friday morning arrived, the demo day. The office was buzzing. The investors were there. 3 partners from a top-tier VC firm, guys who controlled hundreds of millions of dollars. They were sitting in the boardroom, looking expectant. The big screen was set up. The champagne was on ice in the corner. Julianne was wearing a power suit that probably cost more than my car. She huddled us up in the hallway 5 minutes before the presentation. She gave us a teary-eyed speech about family. She said, "I know I pushed you hard, but look at what we built. This is just the beginning for us." I looked her dead in the eye and told her she was right. It was just the beginning. We filed into the boardroom. The core team stood against the back wall. Julianne took the stage. She was charismatic, I'll give her that. She spent 20 minutes hyping up the market opportunity, the proprietary algorithms, and the scalable architecture. The investors were eating it up. Then came the moment of truth. "And now," she said, gesturing dramatically to the large monitor, "I'd like to show you Project Onyx in action." She tapped the spacebar on the demo laptop. The screen refreshed, the logo spun, and then a bright red box appeared in the center of the screen. System locked. awaiting decryption keys. Julianne didn't panic immediately. She just laughed a little, a tight, nervous sound. Ah, security first, just a moment. She typed in the admin password she had on a sticky note. Access denied. She typed it again. Harder. Access denied. She looked at the transition manual on the podium, the one I had printed for her. She flipped to page 42. She started typing the gibberish command I had written there. Error. Invalid syntax. The room got quiet. The lead investor, a guy named Robert who didn't look like he had a sense of humor, cleared his throat. Julianne, is there a problem? She was sweating now. I could see the sheen on her forehead. She looked back at us, at the back of the room. Her eyes were pleading. She was silently begging us to step in, to fix it, to be the loyal little workers we had always been. I looked at Marcus. He looked at Sarah. And then, for the first time in 3 months, I felt completely relaxed. OP? Julianne said, her voice tight and high. She tried to make it sound like a casual request, but her eyes were screaming. Why don't you hop on here and just push the patch through? Technical difficulties, right? She let out a breathless little laugh directed at the investors. The investors weren't laughing. Robert, the lead partner, was tapping his pen on the mahogany table. I walked to the front of the room. I could feel the carpet under my shoes. I could feel the eyes of my team burning into my back. This was it. I stood next to her at the podium. I looked at the error screen. Then I looked at the investors. And finally, I turned to Julianne. I can't fix it, Julianne, I said. My voice was calm. It carried through the silent room perfectly. What do you mean you can't fix it? She hissed, leaning in close so the investors wouldn't hear. Just type in the password. Fix it now or you can forget about that VP title. I stepped back so I wasn't whispering. I wanted everyone to hear this. I can't fix it, I repeated, loud and clear, because I don't work here anymore. Robert stopped tapping his pen. Excuse me? He said. Julianne's face went pale white. He's joking, she said quickly. He's just stress humor. OP, sit down. I'm not joking, I said, addressing Robert directly. According to the transition plan Julianne approved on Tuesday, my employment and the employment of my entire team effectively ended the moment this demo started. We've been replaced. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. And since we're no longer employees, we don't have authorization to decrypt the live database. That would be a security violation. You'll have to ask the new team to do it. What new team? Robert asked. His voice was like ice. The offshore team in Bangalore, I said. The one Julianne hired to replace us to save the company $1.2 million a year. Julianne grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my sleeve. Stop it, she whispered violently. We can talk about this outside. I don't think we can, I said, shaking her off. Because they don't have the keys either. You see the manual I wrote for them? The one you didn't bother to read because you were too busy planning your victory lap? It doesn't include the decryption keys, those live in our heads. And since we were being fired to secure your efficiency bonus, we figured we'd take our intellectual property with us. That was the kill shot. Efficiency bonus? Robert asked. He stood up slowly. Yes, I said. The $250,000 bonus Julianne negotiated for cutting the core team immediately post-launch. It's all in the chat logs on the iPad she left on my desk. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the projector fan. Julianne looked at Robert. She opened her mouth to speak, to spin it, to lie, but nothing came out. She looked at the blank screen, then at me. The realization hit her. She didn't just have a failed demo. She had a fraud investigation on her hands. I looked at her one last time. Good luck with the launch, Julianne. I hear the new team is very cost-effective. I turned around and walked toward the door. Marcus, Sarah, and the rest of the team stood up in unison. They didn't say a word. They just fell in line behind me. "Wait!" Julianne screamed. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a desperate, shrill shriek. "You can't just leave. You signed contracts. I will sue you. I will ruin you." I paused at the glass doors, holding them open for Sarah. I looked back at Julianne, who was trembling at the podium. "You can try," I said, "but you'll have to get the servers running first to find the contracts. And I think they're encrypted too." We walked out. We left the building, walked 3 blocks to a dive bar, and ordered a round of shots at 11 a.m. on a Friday. The fallout was spectacular. We found out later from a friend in HR that the demo ended about 2 minutes after we left. Robert walked out, pulling the funding term sheet immediately. The company valuation didn't just drop, it evaporated. They tried to bring in forensic IT guys to crack our encryption, but Project Onyx was built well. Too well. Without the keys, the data was just noise. They eventually managed to restore a backup from 2 months ago, but by then, the market window had closed and the reputation damage was done. Julianne didn't get her bonus. She was fired for cause, gross negligence and mismanagement. Last I heard, she was trying to rebrand herself as a life coach on Instagram because no tech firm in the city would touch her with a 10-foot pole. As for us, we didn't get the promotions, we didn't get the equity, but we got something better. We started our own consultancy firm about a month later. Our first client? One of the other investors who had been in that room. He liked the product, but he told us he was more impressed by the security protocol. He said anyone who could brick a system that effectively was someone he wanted on his side. We called our new company Onyx, just to be petty. So the moral of the story? If you're going to stab your team in the back to climb the ladder, make sure you don't ask them to hold the ladder for you while you do it. Because sometimes they might just walk away and let you fall.
Thanks for watching and listening to Manhattan Exposes. What story would you like to hear next? Drop it in the comments below, and kindly leave a like and subscribe to hear more stories like this. Until next time.